Hi everybody at home. As you can see here, today we're on a bit of different setup. Oh, that's the one we're... Hey, great. Wonderful. We have a bit of a different setup today because we have a class who are delivering tomorrow. So we have decided to move classrooms and therefore setups and stuff like that. It's also why we're, I think, 2 minutes late because we have some technical difficulties we're just trying to get ahead of. So yeah, so welcome everybody. My name is Kjellfe. I am a teacher here at CADA Trumax. I am also a teacher at ICA Technical University in Riga. I do miniature sculpting in my free time, as well as I'm the local Unreal and Blender dude. So today we are going to model a barrel. I like doing the barrel because it's quick, it's easy, it touches upon most things that you need to touch upon when modeling things, and it shows the workflow we're going to go through is going to be like the good workflow for topology and stuff like that we want. So yeah, I'm joined by my lovely assistants Christian and Mito. Christian is down at the other end of the classroom right now compared to normally, and he has no mic, so he's going to come running up here when you guys have questions and stuff like that. Mito, I think, ran out to get himself a glass of water, but that's great. And behind me, you see some lovely student artwork. So yeah, let us jump into it and go. Hi. So this is Blender. If this is your first time opening up Blender, this is your quick setup menu. There's not a lot we need to do here. The only thing I would suggest for beginners, and this is also a thing I generally do, even though I'm not a beginner, is I changed the spacebar function to search, because the search function is really, really good for beginners or for intermediates or for more advanced users, because it tends to be very nice that if you can't quite remember where something is, or if you don't know what a function is, you can press space, you can type in search. Normally it's on F4, if I remember correctly. So yeah, and if you need to play, it's shift space anyway, so that's a fairly easy hotkey to have at all times. So I tend to think the search is better used there anyway, and I really think that there. You can also change your theme. I'm sorry if I blind somebody at the next stage, but you can do Blender Light, which is really light gray. You can do Deep Gray, gets these really nice orange accents. It looks very technical. You can even go Maya if you want Maya's color palette. And you can even see the backdrop is very close to what Maya has. Minimal Dark, which will just close down a lot of the bevels on corners. Everything gets these very sharp edges, stuff like that. It takes a little less computer power, but really nothing that you should ever worry about. Got Moto, which is kind of interesting, I guess. Print Friendly, which will blind you. And White, which will also blind you. And XSI, which is something else. So, I tend to like mine as Blender Dark. This will also save your power bill a little bit, because dark UIs and layouts take less power for your screen to power. So, after having changed our spacebar function to search, and whatever theme you want to use, we're going to click next. And then we're going to be set into the startup menu. This menu will open up every time you open up Blender. Out here on the side where it says getting started, if you are on a machine where you have a bunch of other projects, this will have your recent projects in it. So you can actually see the recent projects. You don't have to find it. You can just click them here, which is really nice. And out in the left-hand side, we have our file types. Now, the different file types come with a few different UI setups that will help that specific type of workflow. But in general, I only use the general one because you have access to all the other things anyway. And we're doing 3D, so no reason to do 2D animation. But yeah, so we're going to click general, and we're going to be given our standard scene. Now, let us just stay with the standard scene for the navigation part of this, and then we're going to go into modeling and stuff like that soon enough. So to begin with, oh, sorry. Yeah, I need to install an add-on so that you guys can see what buttons it is I'm pressing. There you go. Boop. And here we go. Turn on screencast keys. Don't want a background. I do like it to be a bit more orange though. There we go. And where are you, my friend? Huh. It seems to have disappeared out of screen. That is weird. It's there for some reason. Come on. Alright, it'll probably show up sooner rather than later. Alright, so to navigate around Blender, we use our middle mouse button. So on your mouse, that will be your scroll wheel. And you click that down, and this will allow you to orbit around in 3D space. And that means, and what we're orbiting around is whatever we have focused at the moment. So when we get into the other ones, you'll see that we're orbiting around other places, stuff like that. But right now we are focusing on this little 3D cursor, is what its name is. That is, you know, it's a weird thing Blender has. It's lovely actually, but we'll get to that. And to pan in 3D space, we hold down Shift and middle mouse button. This will allow us to pan back and forth in 3D space, and then we can orbit, and you can see we're orbiting around a new place. It's generally speaking the middle of your screen, really. So, and the final one we have is Control middle mouse button. Holding them both down at the same time will allow you to zoom in smoothly. You can also smooth in by just scrolling on your scroll wheel, but this does it in steps, and those steps are defined by however many steps your scroll wheel is set to in your Windows settings, or Mac settings, I guess. So you have two different options. You actually also have a third navigation thing, which we're not going to touch too much upon today, but we might use a little bit, which is orthographic view. If you hold down Alt middle mouse button and pull, you can see we snap to this view where we can see our cube from 100% on one axis. This is orthographic view, which is a thing that doesn't exist outside of 3D space. It is a view that has no perspective whatsoever, which is really, really good when you're following reference. If you load that into Blender, you can then use orthographic view to make sure your movements fit to that picture with no perspective, right? That's great, that's what we want. All right, so let's start off. If you left click and hold down the mouse button, you can drag a selection box over everything in our scene. We are then going to press X on our keyboard and delete it. The reason why we do this, and the reason why you'll see that this happens in any Blender tutorial you look at online, is when you have default things, they likely come with what's called history. That is construction history, and that's construction history we don't know. So we don't want to work upon what possibly is a faulty baseline. So we would much rather want to create our own stuff, create our own cube and work from that. So let us do that. If we press Shift and A, we will get the Add menu up on our screen. Here we can see there's a bunch of different objects. We are going to start with Mesh. Under Mesh, you'll find the option to create a cube. And a cube is exactly the same thing as we just deleted. This one just doesn't have the same type of history on it. As we know, this one only has its construction history and nothing else. And that is exactly what we want. So, under Mesh, go to Cube, and then click the cube, and we will spawn in a new cube. So, in 3D space, we have the three most used tools, at very least for modeling, is our transform tool or a grab tool. It is our scale tool, and it is our rotation tool. And we're going to go through each of these and how they function now. So if we press G on our keyboard, we will activate our transform/grab tool, and we can move objects around in 3D space based on our camera. Now this isn't too great because even though we have 3D perspective, we don't actually know how far back we are moving this cube, as it's trying to interpolate what it is we're doing, and computers aren't great at that. So instead, we tend to want to lock our transforms to specific axes. In 3D space, we work with 3 axes. We work with Z, X, and Y. As a rule of thumb, for most things and most programs, Z is up. It's like that for Blender. It's like that for 3ds Max. It's like that for Unreal Engine. I even think it's like that for Unity and for most other 3D softwares. You will have outliers such as Houdini and Maya that use Y up instead, and there's some historical reasons for that, but as long as you are aware of it, that's great. So we want to move our cube. I'll just right click and Control Z to undo this. We want to move our cube on an axis. We can do this by pressing G. So we have our move, we can move, transform, and then we're going to press Y on our keyboard. This will lock the transform, lock the grab to the Y-axis. So now we can only move it on the Y-axis. We can do the same thing if we press X, and you can see it automatically jumps over to that, or Z for the up axis. You can also, with the grab tool activated, hold down middle mouse button and you get like this different navigation thing. It works fairly well, it just takes some time getting used to. So for beginners, I would stick to X, Y, and Z. And if we dislike our movement, we can right click to cancel. Hello, Mito.
Hi.
Hi. Mito's here.
I just want to put the mic close to that. Oh, that's okay.
It's a little bit in the way, but that's fine.
That's fine. You'll manage.
Are we sure that that's how we want to place it? I think you want to look at the webcam image.
Yeah, I realized. No.
That's just looking worse and worse and worse. Have you checked the sound profiles of it? It should be fine. All right. All right. Can everybody hear me? Great. So that is our grab. Just going to Control set that, get it back to 0, get it back to where we want it to be. We can then use our rotate, which is on R, and this will rotate our object in 3D space. Lovely. And this has the same functionality. We can lock it to any axis we want to rotate it around. Do note that the rotate, instead of rotating around the world axis when you use the middle mouse button, it rotates around its local axes. And this means you have, oh, there you go. Mine's back to its world. Don't know why it did that. That's weird, but yeah, that happens sometimes. There you go. So that actually means you can rotate both around world space, which is your world space XYZ, or your object's XYZ rotations. There you go. So, and of course, these rotate around the axes. If you're used to other 3D softwares, it's important to note that these rotate around the axis and not with them. That's one of those things that seems minor, but actually confuses people when they start sometimes. The fact that you rotate around an axis instead of with an axis gets people a little bit confused. So, and the last one we have is scale. So this will increase the size or decrease the size of anything. And this can also be locked to specific axes. Y. Or, and this works with all three of them, but it's best to show it with the scale because that has the most effect. We can say we only want to move on 2 axes. So right now we're locked to 1, but what if we want it to be locked to 2? Well, we want to tell Blender we want to exclude a specific axis. And we do this by pressing Shift and that corresponding axis. So in this case, I want to scale on the Y and the X axis, but not the Z axis, which is up. So I'm going to press S for scale, that's uniform, and then Shift Z, and this will only scale in X and Y. There you go. So, with this knowledge in hand, I am going to scale up my cube so that it is a vertical rectangle. And after that, I'm going to press G and Z and move up the cube so that it is placed in, like, the bottom of it is placed as close to 0 as possible. That's not strictly speaking necessary, it's just one of those things that I find nice to work on top of the grid, not in the grid. So, yeah. Our scale, grab, and rotation tools are all great. They are the tools we use most of the time when modeling, but they don't allow us to edit or add extra things to our model, so we need to do that in what's called edit mode. Right now, and since we've started, we've been in what's called object mode, and we're now going to switch into edit mode. So we can go up to the upper left-hand corner of our Blender UI here, and we can switch it to edit mode, or we can click on our mesh and press Tab on our keyboard. This will automatically throw you into edit mode and allow you to start editing a mesh or a piece of geometry. We have 3 different modes inside edit mode. We have vertex, edge, and face. And I'll just quickly explain what these different things are. Vertices are points in space with location data on them. That's all they are. When you have 2 vertices, you can make an edge or a line. Here you go. And when you have 3 or more lines, you can make a face, which are the visible parts of 3D models. These are the things we look at when we look at 3D models. We look at the face. And the way edges run across faces is what we call topology, and you want good topology. And we're going to go into a little bit of that later, don't worry. So, to start us off, we want some more geometry on this. And by more geometry, I mean we want more edges. Because we want to stay as low poly, we want to stay as simple as possible for as long time as possible. Because we can always add more, but once we've added more, it's more difficult to take away. Because suddenly those things are giving us shape, and by taking them away, we're ruining what we made. We don't want to do that. So we're going to stay as low poly as possible for as long as possible, and then we're going to go up from there. So we're going to find our loop cut tool out here in the left hand side. I like activating it. I know you can press Control I to get it. Don't remind me. It's great. And as you can see here, now there is a loop highlighted around our object. And I'm just going to click that twice. See here on the vertical sides of our cube. Boop, boop, like so. Then I'm going to press W on my keyboard. This will deactivate that tool. And now we need to select these two edge loops because they're a loop going around the cube. And we're going to do that by holding down Alt on our keyboard and left clicking on the first one, then holding down Alt and Shift, left clicking on the next one. As you can see, this has selected both the loops all the way around our cube. We're going to press S, Shift, Z, and we're going to scale this out so we get an octagon. And the reason we're doing this is because we're making a barrel. Barrels are traditionally round, so we're going to do that. All right. So now what we want to do is we are going to create the lip and the lid of the barrel, which is like, it's the little up part where the boards on the outside of the barrel, they come up, and we're going to create a little bit more space to make like a cartoony thing. And then we're going to create the lid for the barrel so that it's a closed object. All right. So we're going to press 3 on our keyboard to go to face mode. I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to click once on each of the top faces. This will allow me to select them. And I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom, all the while holding down Shift. All right. With these faces selected, we are going to press I on our keyboard, and this will activate the inset function. The inset function will create a new loop of faces around our selection and allow us to scale that selection inside it to its, only in and out. So this gives us the perfect opportunity to make our lip here. So now we have that defined. We're still going to have the top and bottom selected because we want to do more to this. All right. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to press E. This will activate extrude. Now extrude and inset are very similar. The extrude function does exactly... Yeah, I can explain how I made it round. Let me just get a new one. So got a cube here. What I did is I used my loop cut tool. It's either activating it out here on the left hand side or Control R. I prefer activating it, but Control R is the hotkey and I always get flagged for not using the hotkeys. But I prefer activating it because it allows me to click, click to add those two loop cuts. So yeah, with those selected, Alt and Shift to select both the loops. S, Shift, Z will allow me to scale out only in the X and the Y axis. That is S, Shift, Z, and then I just pulled them out until I reached a point where I thought this was good enough. This is great. This is perfect. You can also take it all the way out so that it is even more round, but this is about what I would suggest you going for. There you go. So that is how we do that. I will leave that boy there and then go back to the main one. This will be my, in case somebody needs me to go over things again. All right. So Miriam, are you with us so far? Oh, that's not Miriam. Miriam? I'm probably butchering that. I'm so sorry. So yeah, gonna select the top 4 and bottom 4, and then I'm going to press I on my keyboard and make the lip of the barrel. And I think this is about where we got to, so I'm just gonna let people catch up. And a friendly reminder, next week it's not going to be Thursday, and it's not going to be me, actually. Next week it's going to be Wednesday, because Thursday is a national holiday here in Denmark. And so we've moved it to Wednesday. And the teacher next week will be our lovely Mito, who will be animating for us. Mito is a brilliant animator and a wonderful student here. You're welcome. All right. So, top and bottom still selected. Inset made. We're going to press E on our keyboard. Here we go. Great. And as you can see here, this is currently working as a piston. So the top and the bottom are moving toward, like at the same direction. And that's not what we want. So we want to make this symmetrical. So we want the top and the bottom to move towards each other instead of in the same direction, right? So we are going to press S for scale. You can see now they're scaling away and towards each other, but they're doing it with this, like they're doing it in every axis, and we only wanted to do it in the Z axis. So it's S, Z, and then we can scale inwards. Don't have to be a lot, just, you know, a little bit, like so. And that will allow us to create like that little lip that goes down into the barrel. We are going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to press I. I'm going to create a little bit of a small inset today, like so. And then we're going to press E, S, Z, and scale upward. It's okay if the lid is a little bit below or a little bit above. Lids tend to either be pressurized one way or another, so they will generally be like that. If it's a really good barrel, it will be exactly the same height, but a little bit of variation adds more interest and looks better to the human eye. So we're going to go for that. And as you can see here, we now have like a very low poly chemical drum, but it is the beginning. We're going to make this more and more complicated the further we go on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the bulge, so the rounded part of the barrel that's like in the middle, and we're going to repeat some of this. Well, and we're going to make that, and then we're going to add the bands afterwards. So back to our loop cut tool. I'm going to create one on the horizontal loop here, like so. I'm just going to create the one because we're going to use it for all the rest of them. I'm going to press W for my selection tool, so I'm deactivating my loop cut tool, and then we're going to press S for scale and scale this outward. It's okay to make this a little bit too much. That tends to give you a more cartoony feel if that's what you're going for, more stylized feel, stuff like that. And you know, it's nice. And you might ask yourself why I haven't locked this to an axis, and that is because scale works as a multiplier. It won't actually add anything, it's only multiplying what you already have. So if you have something that has 0 value in a particular direction or in a particular axis, it's not actually going to scale on it. And in this case, this is a edge loop that is completely flat in the Z axis, so it has no value in the Z axis. So we can just scale freely on it. Don't scale too far inwards, this will happen, that looks weird, but yeah. There you go. And yeah, I think that's about good. And I think now I need to switch over to the right side. I do. There we go. So, after this, we're going to use the bevel function. Control B for bevel, and we can move our mouse. And you can see we got a new loop of faces created in the middle of our edge. And this loop of faces takes the average of what's coming into it from both sides and creates a new face there that has that average. So in our case, it's a fairly flat thing here. So we can scale that up to about, give it a little more than like 3/5 of the barrel, maybe even 2/3. That's probably all right. And before you left click, so before you accept this action, if you scroll on your scroll wheel, you're going to add segments to it. If you have already left clicked, don't worry, we can always add them later. So I'll see here, usually 3 or 4 is fine for me. Yeah, let's do like that. I think that's about nice for mine. So when I said we could add them back later, so we've just done our bevel. Down here, we have a menu. That's why I switched my camera, right, by the way. Here, you can see this is the bevels function. We have the shape, so how much of the shape it should take, stuff like that. We also have the segment amount. This segment amount is what I added to when I scrolled on my scroll wheel, and we can add to this now if we want to. I think 4 worked fairly well with my barrel today. Sometimes it works better with others. You can also play with the shape in case you want to like make an apple core or like really bloat it out or have it being very jagged, stuff like that. And it's just, you know, nice little thing that you can still edit it after you've accepted what you're doing. All right. So with that done, I'm going to left click to accept it. And what I need now is I need 2 edges like this and like this. Or like 2 edge loops like this and this, because these are going to become the bands of my barrel. All right. It is warm today. All right, so these bands, we're going to repeat the process that we just did. So we're going to bevel these. Control B for bevel. And I'm going to remove the extra segments from this one by scrolling my scroll wheel. And I'm just going to have them be, we can do them a bit chunky today actually. Do like that. And these are now going to become the bands that go around our barrel. Now, if you want your barrel to be a bit rounder, if you want it to be like, because this is still like an octagon, if you want something that has a bit more shapes, a bit rounder, a bit smoother, the way to do this is going in with your loop cut tool and adding those loops in here. So that you can see here I'm adding 4 cuts. So I'm splitting up the flat faces here, 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 and here. And now we need to repeat one of our first steps, which is scaling this out so that it fits again. You can use procedural effects that will do this fairly automatically, but that will also give you a lot of useless geometry along with it that you might not want. All right, so I'm going to deactivate my loop cut tool. I'm going to select these 4 new edges. S, Shift, Z. I'm just going to round this out a little bit, like so. You can see that already makes it very barrel-y. It really creates a barrel. So if you want it a bit more round, you can do that. You can also keep it low poly. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a style. It's fine. And now, and it's important we do it now because we're going to start creating effects that will take things out of the loops a little bit. So yeah. Now I'm going to press 3 on my keyboard or go up here and select face mode. up here in the top left-hand corner. Hold down Alt, and there you go. I'm going to select a face loop, hold down Alt and Shift, and select another face loop. So like said, these are going to be the barrel bands of the barrel. Now, we could just extrude these out, but I like having them a bit separate, so we are going to keep them separate. And we're going to do this by duplicating these faces. So we are going to select them and press Shift D to duplicate. And you can see here, I now have duplicates of the faces. If after I press Shift D, I move mine out to show you, I can right click and they will snap back into place. Ooh. And after this, we are going to want to press S, Shift Z, and we're going to scale these outward. And this is because these bands, of course, sit on the outside of the barrel, so we want them to be further out, but we don't want them to, you know, scale upwards either, because that's going to look weird. So S, Shift, Z, and I'm just going to make mine a bit like that. Actually, let's give it an extra one. There we go. All right. So after having done that, we can now see we have these beautiful bands, but they're not very, like, there's a hole between the barrel and the bands, and we can see the back side of the bands. These are called the normals of the faces, and they're invisible. Faces tend to only be visible from one side. You can, of course, cheat this with two-sided materials and stuff like that, but by default, faces are invisible from one side. All right, so we are going to press 2, go back into edge mode, and here we're going to select the top and the bottom edge of our bands, like so. And now we're going to extrude these inward, so we're going to press E, S, Shift, Z, and I understand that this is a lot of hotkeys after each other, so if you miss a step, don't worry. Just tell me, I'll go over it again. So E, S, Shift, Z, and we can extrude inward. Don't spend a bunch of time trying to get these to line up perfectly with the edge, because it's going to look exactly the same if you just have it to penetrate. Like so. And you can have this penetration being as wild as you want. But, yeah, don't worry about it. Penetration's fine. Yeah, let's go like that. There you go. So, and with that, we actually have a fairly decent barrel. We can, of course, we should, of course, add a little bit of extra to it. So let's do that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm in face mode, going to select all by pressing A. So 3 to get into face mode, press A to select all, and then let's use our spacebar, our search function. There you go. And we're going to say shade smooth. What this will do is attempt to shade our object smooth. Right now it's shading flat, but we want to shade it smooth. And as you can see, when we search for a function, it actually tells us the hotkey of that function. So that means after we've searched for it 10, 15, 20 times and we're tired of searching for it, we just want to use the hotkey, we can do that. Boop. There you go. Our barrel is now shaded smoothly, so it gets this bit more round feeling. You're going to get these darker like knots because that's when it's trying to shade over a corner that's too sharp for it to do it. And that's normally a lack of geometry, nor a lack of faces, stuff like that. So we can add a bit more in there to help it. We are going into edge mode, and we're gonna go revisit our friend the bevel, because one of the things that 3D struggles with that real life doesn't struggle with, let me just shade this flat again, is edges are harder inside 3D than any edge is in real life. Like, I have a ruler here. I hope you can kind of see it. This edge, even though it looks like a 90-degree, edge on it, is not 90 degrees. Like, the corner is beveled just a little bit, and that will catch light. But in 3D, a 90-degree angle is a 90-degree angle. There's no tolerance. It's just a 90-degree angle, and it's super sharp, which also means it doesn't capture a lot of light. So it makes things harder to read. And as you can see here on my model and example, this face, or these faces here, and the top of my barrel are blending in together. To avoid that, we tend to try and break up these transitions using bevels. These are also called support bevels and things like that. So what we want to do is we want to select every hard edge we got. There we go. So top of the barrel, top and bottom of the bands, and the bottom of the barrel. I got next one there. There you go. Go, and there you go. So what I did, Alt Shift in edge mode, I just selected the top one, inner side of the top lip, outer side of the top lid. So yeah, if you're having troubles and it keeps doing selecting like this and it's super annoying, the way the Alt and select loop function works is whatever edge you're closest to is the way it's going to go. So if I go here, for example, it's going to go vertical, but if I go closer to the horizontal ones, it's going to go horizontal around. So my MV Pro effects, that is where you're getting stuck. Your mouse cursor is too close to one of the horizontal or vertical edges, and that's why you select upwards. We want to hold it closer to one of the vertical edges, then we will select around on the vertical, or on the horizontal ones. The horizontal edges, here like that. Edges, it's a bit easier because it's the rarest times that edges go in 4 different directions. They are by what's it called? By definition 2D. They're vectors. So, all right. We were doing bevels, right? Yes. All right. I'm just gonna let you guys keep up. And yes, it should work. Good. I am very happy to hear that. All right. So, in edge mode, I'm just gonna... Am I way too fast and very far ahead? Because do tell me, if I don't get any feedback, I tend to just speed up and speed up and speed up and speed up. So yeah. Yep. Oh. Remember to stretch out every now and again. 3D is a very stationary thing, and stretching out is important for your back and for your muscles, for your posture. You only have one back so far, so we sort of kind of gotta make sure that it doesn't break too early. And if it does, we gotta pray them bionics get here quickly so we can get a new spine. There we go. So with all the edges selected here, we're just gonna press Control and B, and we're gonna give them not a big bevel, just eensy weensy tiny bevel. the more of a bevel you give it, the more like stylized it will look. The less of a bevel you give it, the more realistic it'll look. So we do like that. Let's reset that to 5. There we go. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, I'm gonna select that. And I'm just gonna hop out of edit mode. And now you can see these edges. There are still a few places where they bleed into each other, but it's a lot more visible. It stands out more. And the more bevel you add, the more it will stand out. So that is the way we make sure that these things have a bit more depth and curvature. Because you can see now it's still the top will blend into this. I could of course make the bevel in here a lot more extreme if I wanted to avoid that. You can see now this won't blend in together the same way. But it's very nice because this, like I said, adds some support loops. And when we now shade smooth, boop, we will still actually have a little bit of a bevel that will keep some of the curvature for us, which is great. All right. So that's 50 minutes. How is everybody at home doing? And where are you joining us from, by the way? I forgot to ask at the start of the stream. I'm supposed to do that. Yeah. Yep. And of course, if you have any questions both to the school or to the 3D industry, we would love to hear them and do our best to answer them within our scope of expertise. All right. No. It's always awkward with this delay, though. All right. So we can add a few more details to this while you guys think about some questions. So a few of the details I like to add is like individual boards. It takes a bit longer time, but I'm guessing we got the time today. And a good place to start is actually the lids. So what I want to start by doing is I want to start by straightening these edges out so that you get more straight board looks to it. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to select one side here and then the other side. This will select or pick the shortest path, as the function is called, between the two edges you have selected. Now I'm going to press S, and then I'm going to look at my screen and see which axis it is I want to flatten this on. So in my case, it's the x-axis. So I'm going to press S and X and then pull my cursor as close to the middle as possible. You can see this sort of straightens out this area. So that means we can now turn this into a board or a piece of wood. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. Whoop. And it might ruin a little bit of the shape out here, but it's honestly not enough for me to, like, it's not something you notice, and it gives us more than it takes, so we will be fine with it. All right. So let us, from here, go to face mode, press 3, and then we are going to hold down Control, and we're going to select it on the other side. So we're doing one face and then one face on the other side. We're going to do it again here and here. So I've selected all of this so that this can become one board. And all I'm going to do to it is I'm going to extrude it just a teensy weensy bit, like so. So now you can see there's already a little bit of difference in the shading. Once we do this to all 4 of those, that difference is going to be like a dark divot, and it's going to look a lot more like a board than it normally would. So I'm going to do the same thing for the next one. Ooh, That's an interesting way you want to go. If it picks the shortest path in a weird way, you might have to manually select this. That's okay, that happens. Sometimes you want automated tools to fix everything for you, and a teacher will tell you, yeah, it's not going to do that. And you can keep on trying to make automated tools doing it for you, but in the end it will be quicker if you just do it by hand. So for this one it worked. Selected one face, went to the other side, held down Control, selected the next one, select the shortest path. Go E for extrude, just a little bit. What I really want is this variation in the surface. I'm not too fussed if they aren't completely aligned, because that just adds a little bit of that human element, a little bit of human error, naturalness to it, and that's just very, very nice. All right, now we're just missing the last one. And of course, we can then repeat this process for the bottom side. Go. You can see that now becomes this very nice boarded look. There's a little bit of shading issues with it, so we can go in, we can select the edges, and we can then say shade flat. There you go. Okay, that's not probably the inside here, so shade that flat. Hopefully that will fix it. Nope. Just trying to figure out where it is. It's having troubles with this. For some reason, it's apparently the whole thing, which doesn't make much sense. Don't want to shade that. That actually works. Yeah, so for these, if you're having the same shading issues as I am here, it can be an idea to just shade them flat. It's gonna give you a more consistent look, but it's not gonna give you that nice rounded feel if that's what you were going for. Like, it is gonna make things look more segmented, more low poly 3D stylized. So I'm not gonna do the bottom of mine, but if you want to do more on yours, you should definitely consider doing the bottom so that you have, you know, a fully detailed, fully modeled barrel. You could even consider doing it in the opposite direction, so this one goes along the y-axis, this one could go along the x-axis instead. That will add a little, again, variation, natural feel. The more of that that's in there, the more appeal a model will have. So yeah. We can, of course, also add these variations in the boards to the outside of the barrel. This takes a bit of time, but it's pretty much the same process. Selecting one board at the top, we have to remember to get the inside here, and then doing the same thing for the bottom, and just extruding it out a little bit. And that will give that board, and as soon as we do the ones next to it, those boards will suddenly start standing out a lot more because they're going to have canyons, creases, whatever you really want to call it, between each other. Like so. You can see that gets that very barrel-y boarded look. Ooh. Just a little bit out, just a little bit, and there we go. And of course, do this as much or as little as you want to for your barrel. It does add a lot to it, so like I would suggest doing it, but again, it's your choice. You could also paint it in textures if you want to. We'll be doing that in 3 weeks at the open house event, where we will be texturing a object of some sort. We'll be doing a vote on our Instagram about what object it will be. I have a series of objects, and we will then texture that, or one of them's, in Blender's own texture painter, which isn't the greatest, but it is, you know, a function that everybody has available, and therefore is what we're going to use, because there's no reason for me to give you guys a course in a program you don't have access to. That would be silly. All right, so let go there. And it does take a little while, but yeah. So if you're not doing this, again, we are very accepting of questions. If not, we can always talk about anything and everything. If you have any questions about like the VFX or CGI industry as a whole, job opportunities, job market, what is it like, stuff like that, bring it up. I would also love to answer those things. Boop, doop, 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 boop, boop. See, there we go. Are there any steps I need to repeat? Or anything you might have missed that you would like to go through again? Oh dear. Oh, well, here we have a situation where I actually have to pick everything by hand. I have to remember there's something on the inside here. And that little bevel I made, that bevel I made. Am I selecting the wrong thing? I am. I am completely selecting the wrong thing. I already got a board there. There you go. So, if you want to begin in the 3D industry, well, first of all, you gotta learn a lot of the things. You gotta learn most processes. You don't need to know, you don't need to be an expert in every process. And in case you guys aren't following along in chat, Mariam is asking, hello, which countries, country or countries have the industry for beginners in 3D or want to, or who want to pursue this in this area like us? What about Denmark? So in Denmark, we have in Denmark, we have a fairly lively gaming scene. We have a single AAA studio, but we have around 800, I think that was the last one I saw, but that's a few years old. We have about 800 smaller companies as well that works in games, from mobile games to computer games to, yeah, you name it, people are working in it. And there's always need for 3D artists in these industries and in the gaming industry, as well as we have some fairly big production companies for film and VFX and commercials and stuff like that. So there's also good in there. The field is expanding onto other things where you can, you know, use that and work or use it in other applications and in other instances. Logos for companies, even though that used to be graphic designers, 3D artists are also doing that. I recently did a bit of a freelance job where I was just creating graphics, 3D graphics for a presentation from a big tech company. They had a guy who needed, illustrations, and I did 3D illustrations for him. That worked perfectly. So there's a bunch of these things that do sort of like sprout up. The architectural industry is using a lot. The automotive industry is using 3D a lot. 3D printing, for miniature design, for product design, for merchandise design. All of these things, we are a branch that is going out. For beginners, well, you kind of, if you're in, it depends on your country and the way the country is or the industry is in your country. In Denmark, because a lot of those companies are a bit smaller, broader knowledge is better. Small companies tend to not be able to pay for specialist knowledge and specialist employees, because you need somebody who can always do some work and not just when there's particular function steps in. Once you get to bigger companies, that will sort of shift, and it's because there's always so much specialist work, it actually pays to have a full-time specialist hired. As a beginner, I would try and figure out what it is you want to do as a beginner. We as a school at CADA, we teach everything. We say we teach generalists, which means that the generalists we teach just means everybody gets a base knowledge of everything, because that's also another important thing to have is, well, you can be really, really good at one thing, but if you don't know what the next step in the pipeline is, that one thing won't mean a lot, because you might not have built things to industry standard. Or you might not have built things that will work for the next step. Like we have built a barrel here today, but we've not unwrapped it, for example. We haven't done so that we could texture this. We could do the same, and we haven't set it up so that it could be animated. If we needed to animate this, we needed a lot more geometry here, because this needs to bend and deform as if it was a bit more what's it called? A bit more biological, rounded shape, stylized, stuff like that. But if you don't know you need to do this, you would say, oh, well, I've made a barrel. It's fine. It's done. And you would send that off and you would get it back and the animator would yell at you. But there is possibilities of starting. You just need to have good portfolio. You need to have good aesthetic sense. And then just start applying. If you want to cheat that whole thing, you can go to a school like us and we will tell you what you're missing in knowledge and we will teach you that. Oh, I don't have my whiteboard here, but like one of the things we like, or I think we do extremely well, is our students will come out with a vast amount of knowledge. And more than that, they will come out with a giant knowledge pool of things they know they don't know. And that might sound like a negative thing, but if you know you don't know something, you still know that thing exists, so it makes it easier for you to research. There's a circle outside of that that's called the unknown unknowns, things you don't know you don't know. So if our students come out with a very, very small unknown unknowns, that means they are able to pick up most tasks and perform them as expected within a very short amount of time. Now, if you don't even know what you don't know, that task might start to be unsurmountable. You might not be able to even start it because you don't know where to start. And that's sort of what having generalist knowledge, for me at very least, and for the school, is about. We don't expect everybody to be generalists, to be good at every single subject, but we do expect people to know a little bit about every subject so that if they're ever set in the position where they need to fulfill that task, they can. And as a beginner, that's very difficult, and that's also why we as a school exist, because we do have that knowledge to fill in your gaps. There's a bunch of subjects within 3D that people who are self-taught a lot of the time just don't know about. I've been on this barrel tutorial we've done today, I've been corrected a bunch of times with people saying, oh, I should do this or that, do that. I'm like, yeah, but why? Like, this is more or less a correct way of modeling a barrel for a computer game or for a movie. A movie, I would do it more detailed, but for a computer game, this is more than fine. And somebody was like, yeah, but I like to do simulations. Okay, that's your instance. That's your experience. For what we're doing here, I've done a good job. And you need to know the pipeline. You need to know the next few steps before you know if you've done a good job, because you need to work towards that. It's the fewest people who can make a movie, make a game all on their own. It's a team effort, and you need to prepare every bit of your work for that team effort. And if that is making good models for the texture artists, for the animators, for the riggers, then you do models. You do a bunch of models, you model a bunch of different things in different styles. You don't stick to one thing, you go to a bunch of them. So yeah. But for now it's modeling and sculpting. I am personally into sculpting as everything. So yeah, sculpting is a very like instant gratification thing. It's the one that feels the most textile and the most traditional artistic thing. So it's the easiest thing to get hooked on. And that hook grabs most people at one point or another. Sculpting is just fun. It's amazing. It's lovely. And 3D modeling is then the necessity you need to learn afterwards if you start with sculpting. While if you start with 3D modeling, you know that your sculpting needs to go through a process, and the modeling will give you a strong basis for that process. That's retopology, by the way. That's good. Yeah. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things there. Like sculpting is lovely, but it's really the first step of a process, and it needs to go through a bunch of other things to become useful. Because most sculpts, if you're using ZBrush, if you're using Blender, when you reach the point where you're finished with the sculpt, they will be too dense to actually work within a pipeline. So you need to make what's called a retopology, which is a simpler version of it, and then that will be the basis for your animation, for your rigging, for your texturing, stuff like that. And then you can project your high poly version onto your model. Or you can do it you can project it onto what's called a height map, and then use that height map to displace your model in render. Yeah. So yeah, modeling is the basis of sculpting. Sculpting seems very fun, like it works, but modeling is really the basis of it. You do need to know how to model. You need to know what correct topology is. You need to know what retop is and how things are going to work specifically for animation. So that is the whole thing. If you're working in a team and you know you have somebody who needs to animate a model, this is a barrel. And of course I'm saying this when we're going to animate a barrel next week. But if we did a human being, that human being, if you sculpted it, would have triangles and squares everywhere, and they wouldn't really make sense. You need to retop that in a way that you know it's going to deform, like the way my shirt and my shoulders, when I stretch my arm, when I turn my arm, all these muscle things. You need the correct topology to get these things to work if you're doing high fidelity animation. And to get the correct topology for that takes a while and isn't necessarily something you'll get by just learning it by yourself. You will likely need somebody to look at it, as well as somebody to try and animate on it. So when you do the rigging, you need somebody to test the rig, because you might do the rig and then know, well, I cannot turn the hand more than 180 degrees because that will then break the model. While an animator who doesn't know that needs to go that and tell you, that's wrong. Do that again. And that's a part of the process. It's also a part of the professional process that things will get rejected and you got to do it again. All right. So I don't really have anything more. Like, we got further with this barrel in an hour than I usually do in an hour and a half. So, yeah, let's just go straight into question time. I can do the screws. Yeah, so we can add some bolts here to the bands. Let's do that. And I'll go through how I did that, and you guys can think about some questions or follow along. It's really up to you. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in a separate object, so we can see up here I have my cube, I'm going to add a sphere, so Shift A, and then go UV sphere. This will spawn a perfectly segmented sphere. And we're just going to scale this down to the size of what we would think a screw or bolt is. And for this, we can actually very nicely go into a orthographic view. Come on. Just need to force it into the x-axis. There we go. And what we can do here is we can place it where we would like this on the band of our barrel. So I'm placing it fairly in the middle, and I want mine to be in the x-axis here, like so. And yeah. Then I'm just quickly gonna do this for the bottom at the same time. So I'm gonna press the same thing, or I'm gonna press tab to get into edit mode with everything selected on this. So press A, we're gonna Shift D, duplicate it, place it here at the bottom. So now we have the top and the bottom at the same time. Chef's kiss, it's wonderful. We're gonna go out, actually we're gonna stay here. We're gonna press A again. So we have everything selected. We have both the top bolt and the bottom bolt. Like so. I'm just gonna, I realize that went a bit fast. So I'm just gonna let you catch up. And yeah. All right. All right. So with that, we are going to go in here to our left side toolbar. We're going to find the spin tool, and it will create this little quarter of a circle with plus symbols on. And once we drag that around, you can see it'll create bolts all the way around our barrel. Now they will be offset a little bit, so we can do a little bit of tweaking here by either pulling on these arrows to get them to get further in if we want them to do that, as well as I like to go in here and make sure that this is, like you can see the options menu down here on my left hand side. I want to make sure that this goes 360 degrees round. Auto merge is set on so that these things are automatically merged in together. And then I'm just going to move it so that everything penetrates the band a little bit. We might need to go in and adjust some of them manually, but that's, you know, a little bit of tweaking is always good. All right. Yep. And now we're going to adjust these manually because we have some of them that are floating. And the way we're going to do this, because if we select all, we're going to select all now. We don't want that. Is we're going to hold our mouse cursor over one of those that are floating and press L. This will select linked and allow you to select like an entire sphere, which is really nice. And we're just going to repeat this step for all the ones that are kind of floating. Or if some of them are disappearing a bit too much, we can go in and just take them out a little bit, make them more visible. I see now that my original placement might not have been the best because it seems like I have to adjust all of these. Oh, sorry. G, Shift Z. And I'm just using G, graph, and then Shift Z to make sure that I'm only moving on the X and the Y axis. I don't want to adjust it in its height. Almost there. And of course, you could dual select these because you know the bottom is going to have the exact same issue. So like that. L, L, G, Shift Z. There you go. And now I'm just gonna go in and do my double work by making the bottom as well. So yeah. So Miriam, you said you were at Miriam, you said you were at a school. Which school is that? It's always interesting to hear where people are from, what schools they're in, stuff like that. Alright. So there you go. That's your bolts. Your nuts and your bolts. So yeah. And there's a little bit of adjustment with that, and that's alright. You know, adjustments is always be needed. The more you sit and tweak, the more you sit and adjust, the more you refine things, these things are gonna get look more like better and better and better. This is really like 3D as a field where the more time and effort you put into things, the more you're gonna get out of it. Both learning wise, you get more used to the tools, how they feel, how they work, and your results tend to be better the more time you spend on them. That counts for personal work mostly, while in a professional case, it would be lovely to have more time to finish things, but most of the time, you have a deadline. And you have to do things to, you know, meet that deadline. Yo. What happens if I click that? Oh, perfect. All right. So yeah, that is sort of it. I don't really have anything more, unless you guys have suggestions. I don't think I'm gonna add anything else to my barrel. No, I've never done rigging in this. No. I've tested it. It doesn't work. I got a suggestion of doing rigging in this, and I tested it. It's one of those things that doesn't work. Mito suggesting let's rig it. Let's get it ready for the animation for next week. And I'm sorry to say that it doesn't quite work, sadly. I can do it, but when I say that it probably won't work too well with the tutorial, that probably is true. Yeah, so I just had a quick idea, because you can see we have all these annoying shading issues. If you go out into your right hand side here, before we were on what was called our properties tabs. So this is your location and all that type of things for your object. Under here, there's a little spanner. These spanners are your modifiers. Modifiers are procedural effects that happen in screen but aren't permanent until you make them permanent. If you go in and you click add modifier and add a bevel to it, it actually cleans up a lot of those shading issues we had before, so that you get a lot cleaner barrel to look at, which looks very nice. So what this essentially does is it takes every edge we have and doubles it. We can also triple it, actually. And that gives us an even better result. There we go. We can make it, we can make it bigger. No. Yeah. And this just gives you a lot cleaner look. It actually makes it look very, very nice. So I would definitely say go for it, do that. It does add a little bit of extra edge here that I'm not particularly a fan of, but we can probably just fix that a little bit more. Yeah, we can. There you go. And I just fixed that by going in, scaling it down so it wasn't that extreme. Yeah. And with that, we could probably add a subdivision surface. Oh, that might crash it. No, that we lost everything. Let's not do that. Yeah, nope, no subdivision, just a bevel. Go. Nope. Yep. Try things out. Experiment. Like, when I say experiment with these things, you really learn a lot from trying things out and going, oh, this looks interesting. This looks fun. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's try and apply this modifier. Let's use this function. Stuff like that. It really adds a lot to your learning process and gives you a lot more hands-on experience than just looking up 1,000 tutorials, because those tutorials will usually show you how to do one specific thing, which is also one of those things I strive for with this. I understand that some of it gets a little bit technical, but I really... Oh, I can see my sphere in my object manager. No. So in your this is called your outliner. If you cannot see your sphere, you might have created your sphere while you were in edit mode for your barrel. You can see here. Oh, there you go. There's the sphere. But because I added it to my scene when I was in edit mode, that means it's now part of the barrel's construction. And if that annoys you, I would select the sphere, press P. This activates your separate function, and it's going to say selection by material, by loose parts. And if we do by selection, it'll be whatever you have selected. If we do by material, it has no effect because we only have one material on right now. But if we do by loose parts, it's actually going to split everything that's not a part of the main barrel. So now my bands are also separate things. So yeah. So yeah, that is likely because you pressed Shift A and added the sphere when in edit mode on the barrel. If you want to have it as a separate object, go out of the edit mode by pressing Tab and then adding it there. Yep. And yeah. So yeah. Actually, I have an idea. So this is a little bit of an extra thing. If you want to add like a little tablecloth to it, that you sometimes see in movies, we can actually do that fairly quickly. It's a little bit heavy, but we can do it fairly quickly. So in object mode, so I'm not in any of the other objects, I'm just in the layout function, right? Press Shift A and add a plane here. Boop. Gonna move that plane up like so. And I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger like that. So when we go into this plane, we can see that it's just a face. It's 4 vertices and a face. Well, what we want to do to it is we want to subdivide like that, and this will cut that one face into 4. And we want to do this. Let's do 10 times. This means it's 100 times 100 faces now. All right, we're gonna press Tab, go out of edit mode and back into object mode. And now what we want to do is we want to add cloth simulation, so your clothes simulation, to this top one. And we want to tell it that the barrel is a collider. This is something the cloth can collide with. And to do this, pick your cloth to start with. Go out here on your right hand side. Where we had our modifier properties before, we want to go down to and find its physics properties here. And here we have a bunch of presets that work fairly decently out of the box. Some of them need a little bit of tweaking, but for what we're going to do now, this should be fine. So, gonna with the plane selected, I'm going to add a cloth function to it. That means this is now a cloth simulated. Nothing's going to happen right now because it has nothing to collide with. With the barrel selected, I'm going to add a collision effect on it. So this means if there's any physics objects in the scene, they will now collide with this object. It itself will not simulate falling and stuff like that, but it will allow things to collide with it, which is great. And now what we do is we press Shift and Space, and boop, we get a little bit of a cloth simulating. Like said, it doesn't work completely out of the box because it's, you know, a preset, but it works decently enough for it to be like a little tablecloth thingy on top of it. And the further we run it down on our timeliner, you can see here I'm pulling this little blue thing. The more it's going to simulate, at one point it's going to fall off the barrel because that's what these things do. It almost looks alive. Whee! And into infinite. And go back up to the top. But yeah. So if you want to create like a little cloth drapery around it, this is a nice way of doing it. Boop. There you go. And yeah, you can just duplicate that. Actually, don't duplicate that. Maybe a little bit of duplication is fine. And then delete. All right. So with that, we're just gonna hang out for a little bit and, you know, talk questions if you have any questions. Like I said, I don't really have anything more prepared. I'm freeballing here a little bit, which is fun, but ultimately, we can do a podcast. Do you have a subject? All right. So yeah, me and Mito, we tend to like to podcast, as we call it, where it's just us talking about a subject that is currently going around, or games or stuff like that. We also tend to answer questions together, as Mito as a student has that perspective on the world, and me as a teacher, I have a different perspective on things. All right. So yeah, and of course, if you guys have questions, or if you have subjects, if you have things you want us to talk about, we will of course do it. There are things we are not experts in. Like I definitely wouldn't ask us about biology. We're not biologists, but you're welcome to try. We'll have an interesting take on it. But there are people more qualified for that type of stuff. Oh. All right. I will see why this never worked. I'm from Karachi, Pakistan. I'm currently studying an Akri. Oh, cool. That's actually very, very cool.
So weird seeing from this angle now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm mirrored for everybody at home. So.
No, but also like now it's like looking down.
Oh, cool.
It's
yeah.
weird. And with no backdrop.
Yeah, it's interesting having that going there. So you are doing your bachelor's in media and animation. That's pretty cool. So you're also doing 3D animation at ICRA? Is my guess.
What type of animation? Like 2D, 3D? Because I could imagine it being 2D.
I can imagine it being both.
Okay.
So
are schools teaching animation, is it more common for them to teach 2D or 3D nowadays? Isn't it still 2D?
So it really depends on the school, because I see some who focus on purely 3D. But but I also see some who are still very much focusing on both, but starting off with 2D and then moving into 3D afterwards.
Right.
Because the principles of animation, and with this said, I'm not an animator, but I can still talk about this. The principles of animation haven't changed, and it's still the same 12 principles that we're working towards when we animate. And if you're doing 2D or 3D, your medium, your method might be different, but your results should still follow the same principles. Right. You can translate that into like more traditional art forms. Like you can do beautiful watercolor paintings of starry nights and all these. Well, starry nights is oil painting, but you can do beautiful watercolor paintings of landscapes and all these things, and you can do the same thing with oil painting. It's just a medium you choose to use.
That's true.
And 2D to 3D animation, the key word there is animation.
Okay, so going into this, like with animation, so the methods are the same, like principles, all these different
The principles
things.
are the same. The method.
Oh
is
yeah,
different.
sorry, the principles are the same, not the methods. As a person who can't draw, I feel like I would have a hard time doing 2D animation. So 3D is just more approachable, right?
Well, I think you're real. It's approachable, and a lot of things are handled for you, like interpolation steps.
Yeah.
While you're in between keys, you're in between frames between your keys, are handled by the program for you, right? You would have to do those yourself.
Yeah.
Which takes longer time.
Yeah. But also skill. Well, so does like 3D animation, but like.
So I think that's sort of a funny thing because the more you do, the quicker and the better you're going to do of it.
Sure.
If you sat down for the next 3 months and only did 2D animation, at the end of it, you'd be pretty damn good at it.
I mean, I guess. But am I at that point? Am I good at 2D animation or am I good at drawing?
Well, that's then the thing.
Because I could like all right, so I could sit down easily and be like, all right, I'm gonna start learning animation, and I only animate stickmen, because that would be an easy approach for a person who can't draw realistic, or not necessarily realistic, but like.
But I think the key word there is animation, because you're going for animation.
Right.
So when you animate, you're still following the 12 principles, and if you follow the 12 principles correctly with stick figures, then animation will still be appealing.
Yeah.
It'll still be good. And I remember, like a few years ago, there was a lot of these series of stick figures fighting.
Exactly.
But those were well animated.
Yeah.
Even for stick figures.
Yeah. But they weren't visually
appealing
in this.
But the animation was.
Yeah, the animation was. But that's what's carrying it, right? So, but.
Exactly.
Right, but.
So you can do things like that. There are things that are objectively have poor style.
Right. Sure.
Like, and this is going to sound super weird because it's actually, he was very successful, but Don Bluth.
I don't know.
Don Bluth did Anastasia, the Disney, the supposedly Disney movie. Don Bluth did the Anastasia. He did Quest for Camelot. He did a bunch of movies alongside Disney, some of them for Disney, some of them on his own.
Okay.
He was a very, very skilled animator, but he had some tendencies that just didn't look well. So you know the importance that sometimes you don't move everything. You move the things that you want to focus on.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Don Bluth did 2D animation, but everything moved all the time.
Right.
So if somebody was talking and they're doing something with their hand, they would also be doing something over here with their other hand. So this suddenly becomes very messy, very weird to look at. And their legs is also jittering at the same time. And so is the person standing across from them. So that's while it's not poor animation, it's poor directing. And it makes the scene less appealing because it gets very difficult to focus on.
Right. But I mean, if you take that to 3D, in theory, everything moves in 3D as well, except for the things you can't see.
Exactly.
But you could then see everything that was going on in his scene, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. You then framed it so that everything was visible, so that means everything moved. But there are times in 3D where you might not move the pelvis. Less likely, but you might not move the feet because you'll just have their eye case planted on the ground.
Well, sure. Right.
So you would still, with your animation knowledge, be able to animate fairly competently with your stick figures.
I honestly think, if I sat down now and I had a couple of stick figures,
You
But
likely
I
could.
drew a couple of stick figures. I could make something cool.
But that's the whole
Probably-
thing. If you understand animation, it doesn't matter what your medium is. You would likely be able. It'll just take you longer or shorter time. It'll be
Right.
quicker for you to do it in 3D, but you could translate those skills into 2D.
Right, but I also think the reason why it's fine in 3D is that the visually appealing thing has already been given to you, because that's been given to you through a character with a rig.
But
right?
that's exactly the whole. Things are made in teams.
Right. But
You
that
don't-
doesn't work for 2D animation.
Well, you still do teams because
Well, yeah,
one
sure,
dude was
but-
supposed to do a 2-hour movie and can do 5 frames a week, and every second's if traditional 2D animation things tend to have lower frame count and double frames and stuff like that to pad things out, but still it's gonna take years. I do
Right.
remember Disney used to have sweatshops of artists sitting and drawing frames. I'm not kidding. They
But
would
they-
be in warehouses.
But they also knew how to draw. So I'm only like the only scenario of this being that I cannot draw appealingly. I can do appealing animation, but not
But
with
can
like
you draw-
full body characters.
So that it's understandable. So when I'm talking
Well, you
about
could-
if you
I
can draw
guess.
to make something understandable, let me actually just grab Blender here, because we can draw inside Blender, and I have a drawing tablet right here. So let's use it. So, oh damn, oh this is how
I was
it is.
inverted.
Yeah.
Oh no!
I have our other teacher's tablet here, and he is left-handed.
Is
so-
he?
Yeah.
Oh, and you're not.
Yeah, I'm not.
You are a horrible person.
All right. So, like, ooh. Yes, we do actually teach VFX compositing and VFX in general. We use the industry standard of Houdini and tend to try and do that.
And Nuke.
And Nuke. And DaVinci as well, because more and more companies are using that in Denmark.
Really?
Yeah, it's free.
But yeah, it's
you
because
can't
it's free. I
compete
guess.
with that price tag.
I guess it's like Blender.
Well, Blender then is missing some pipeline tools.
Okay,
But
that's
like, let's say we have a scene here. So this is a scene. There's some hills, and there's the sun coming up. Boop boop boop, and we then need to show the sun coming up here. What we would likely do is actually remove most of this sun, and then just go a few lines here. Then when we do this again, we'd have a little bit of the sun shining over. And being able to do this, drawing understandably, is storyboarding.
animation.
Is storyboarding, and that is like you just need to make the story clear, because a lot of the time as an animator, this is what you got.
Yeah, sure.
You have storyboards to go off of.
Yeah.
And then we can have a little dude walking over the hills here, singing a song. No. And then this continues on and on and on. So the real thing here isn't are you good at drawing, it is can your drawing be understood?
But then that becomes storyboarding.
Yes, but storyboarding is just the lead up to animation. And depending on what
Well-
studio and what production you're working on, the storyboard will be more or less like there might only be like, let's say this is going to take 3 seconds, so there's 75 frames here.
Storyboarding is like the block out of 2D animation.
But that was a 3D animation.
Well, yeah, that's true.
But you might be given a scene where there's only 5 frames between each storyboard. So that's all you need to fill out. The rest of it you already got handed to you.
right.
So this still works. And if you, as an animator, you're given the scene, you're sitting in 3D, you're doing these things. If you can see, oh, this works in the storyboard, but as soon as it gets into 3D, it doesn't work anymore. If you can communicate what edits would be good through drawing your own little storyboards on post-it notes and sending them to the storyboard or the writer or the art director, and as long as those drawings are understandable, you might have a better chance of getting your edits through.
Right. Yeah, I guess. I still wish I could draw though.
Then start
it-
doing it.
No, I don't have time. I am busy focusing on 3D animation.
Oh,
And as a hobby, I want to do sculpting and texturing.
then do that.
Yeah, which is
Nothing,
why.
nothing wrong in doing different things.
No, it's very fun. Some becomes work, some becomes hobbies, I guess. But which is also cool because you enjoy both.
Yeah.
And animation for me specifically is more focused on work, while I still enjoy it. And I have a very big spark for it. It's like what I've chosen to do as work, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where I feel the most comfortable. Look at you being an animator. Who said you couldn't animate? That's honestly cool that you can have like a 3D.
Oh yeah, 3D writing thing.
Yeah.
So actually, what we can actually do, we can like do curvature or like
On
yeah, on this, which is kind of cool. So let's do a blank. There you go, and then go into draw mode. Boop, and we want this to. Where are you? Damn, I always forget where this is because I never use the function.
It's like half of Blender's functions, I guess.
Yeah. Alright, so we can then say I want to snap this to faces. There we go. Snap to faces. What? There you go. And now I can draw on this.
Kind of.
Yeah, for some reason that isn't working. That should really work.
Is it because it's not selected?
It might be. No, it's just drawing on the grid. It's being annoying. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
How are you enjoying it so far?
Yeah.
Oh no, the delay. Now we have to wait.
Yeah, the delay is super weird for us. Let's set this down to 0, 0, 0. Like, let's get all the way. So look here. Now I can do that. Now I'm actually just drawing on the surface.
Oh yeah.
So I've seen a concept artist who actually does this. They'll sculpt everything
And then just draw on it.
and then draw on it.
I mean, isn't that also kind of like the same concept as in ZBrush when you have polypaint?
Well, no. So the thing is, so he's a concept artist, so he gets paid for doing line art.
Ah,
But as he said, he started out being really bad at anatomy
right.
and not really knowing that. So what he would do is he would sculpt it because that was easier
Right.
than doing it traditionally drawn. And then he would do this. He would draw on
draw
top of
over
it
it.
and then render out the line art
That's
and
smart.
then deliver that in.
That is smart.
It is. It's a funny workflow. It's interesting because the industry is full of people who like found tips and tricks like that.
Yeah. Yeah, because that I see a lot of examples of like 2D artists making out all these different 3D. Because like 3D,
yeah.
3D has become such a useful tool for 2D artists, right?
Yeah, and there's even studios where they will do most of their things in 3D and then just do like character animation.
Yeah.
If you look at Studio Trigger, they have a series called Violet Evergarden.
Yeah.
That don't watch it; it will make you cry. But all the backgrounds and that and all mechanical stuff is 3D.
Oh,
And then all the characters are 2D.
Right.
Which is super interesting because that means you got all the environments and all that stuff. Super easy to just render out a new shot. You don't have to sit and draw every shot.
I mean, it's a beautiful anime.
Yeah, and that is what Studio Trigger is now known for, is
Right.
having these stunningly beautiful shows.
It's become such a useful like both ways, right? Because it's like we as a 3D artist and as a 2D artist, you use the opposite. It just becomes an extra tool. Like we see Arcane, right? So we have Arcane who focuses on like having all their backgrounds being 2D. It's all drawn, right? And a lot of like objects in the background. And then you see examples as Violet Evergarden using 3D as a background instead. just whatever makes the whole workflow and look of it easier.
Yeah. What do you think about the AI as it comes to animation industry? This is actually a really interesting topic, which has been like we have there's ethical things about it that we aren't, that I'm not a big fan of. I don't appreciate that artists' artwork is being taken and trained, or these models are being trained on it without consent. I think that is bad. But at the same time, it is a great tool. It is a wonderful thing.
It's a cool ass tool.
It's a cool ass tool, but there are ethical issues with it.
Yeah, of course. That's the sad part, right?
Yeah, and then that comes the next thing, because we're 3D artists, right?
Yeah.
One of the things there has been a discussion about is, well, where does the line for AI start? Because AI isn't true artificial intelligence. It's just a bunch of algorithms running on top of each other, right? This is an algorithm. This is another algorithm. They're running on top of each other.
Right.
At what point do we define one algorithm to be AI, and at what point do we define another algorithm to be AI? And that starts to become really, really complicated, because it's an arbitrary line no matter where we put it. If you use an auto unwrapper, that's an AI.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a bunch of functions working on top of each other. We are very dependent upon it, because your interpolations and your animations, that's the computer doing it for you.
Yeah. I guess it just becomes a question of time every time something like that happens, right? Because it just evolves until society, until it becomes good enough for society to accept it as a norm.
Yeah, and right now we are in an interesting transitional phase, because there's a lot of lawmaking isn't working fast enough to stop AI from doing this, from quite literally stealing people's work and training the models on them, while artists are calling for a stop on this. They don't want to be a part of it.
Right.
But at the same time, we are seeing industries working. There was a Chinese company that just laid off 60% of their artists and replaced them with AI.
Right.
But that were 2D artists.
Yeah.
Not 3D artists. So we're a bit more lucky in that case, because 3D like model generation, stuff like that, isn't quite there yet. It's coming, but it's not there yet.
I think it's going to be a while, to be honest. I think, if anything, or I think it's 100% just going to become like later on in like time, it's going to become a tool that everyone is probably going to be using.
Yeah.
And it's not going to replace you as the artist. It's just going to be that extra tool that helps you create something easily, or more easy, I guess.
So our headmaster has a funny like snappy quote about that I like, and that is kind of funny. AI will not steal your job. Somebody who knows how to use AI will.
Exactly.
So for us as practical artists, like, we are production artists, we work for a production, and whatever art we do in our free time is what you would consider like the traditional fine high art stuff. But what we actually do for production is production artists. It's the difference between a painter and an illustrator.
Right.
As the production artist, we would likely be forced to use AI one way or another to speed up, to stay on top of things, and things like that. And that would be the way it is. And those are that's the handcuffs. That's just the way the industry and the world works. And we have to accept that.
Right.
We can then go, artist rights, don't train AI unless you've gotten consent. Plenty of artists will give consent. Plenty of artists won't.
Yeah.
That'll be great. As long as there is sort of an understanding about these things.
Sure. I mean, when it comes to AI and it affecting the 3D industry, at this point, I already used AI to speed up my workflow. So specifically, I just started trying out ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Where I wanted to create scripts for Maya that would help me make animations faster, because obviously if I have a tool that allows me to make something faster, I would obviously want to use that. So I created created a script in Maya through ChatGPT, because I don't know how to script. I'm completely new, So that's like the one tool that allows me to be able to create something like that for me to speed up my own workflow, which is great.
Yeah.
And it took, but still, like, even though we say, or a lot of people say that it's going to take our jobs and stuff, it took me 4 hours to make a simple script. That's not like, that's a long time for what people expect of AI. It's like,
Yeah.
and it was a simple script. It wasn't anything crazy, but for it to understand what I specifically wanted, it took me 4 hours to go through that whole process for it to understand at the end. And then I made a working script, which was great and it felt great. But it's not like the AI doesn't understand unless you make it understand.
Yeah. I've experimented with what's it called, Midjourney,
Right.
because I was wondering, well, there's a bunch of things like texturing. We wanted to. How many people really want to draw bricks again and again and again and again and again and again and again?
Right.
Well, you can actually generate some of those.
Right.
So I tested that out. It's not a good result, but it's a result. It's something, and it works. So I did that. I've also experimented with stained glass textures, trying to see what I could do. Non-commercial. Like do note that we're a school. We need to make sure that we are, one way or another, we are also keeping track of this, even if it is just like a dip in the water here and there. But we do need to make sure that we are with the industry and at the cutting edge.
Yep.
So I experiment with it.
Right.
Our IT guy experiments with it. We have our senior teacher Birk experimented with what was the one where you could switch out any person in a shot with a fully animated 3D character.
I didn't know that.
Wonder Studio, that's what it was called. Who experimented with that, tried to get that to work, wasn't impressed, but actually got a result out of it. And there's a bunch of these things where, like, in one shape or another, I hope ethically, these things will come. But we can do our best and hope for, that things will go the right way and that people will stand up.
Balance.
Yeah, balance.
Balance is good.
Balance is good.
Yeah.
And I don't ever think that the human aspect of things will go out of it.
No.
Because, for Into the Spider-Verse,
right,
all the facial contour lines and stuff like that, not all of them, but most of them were created by machine learning, which is an AI in the same way that Midjourney and these things are, because they're trained on a training set and then they give you things. They fed it 450 frames where they had hand-drawn all of these contour lines, and then it spat out the rest of the movie with them.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. They then watched it, noted down when it didn't look right, made those by hand, but it meant that they had to do maybe 4 or 5 seconds instead of an hour and a half.
Yeah. Which is, again, a really good workflow.
But it was ultimately people who did it in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then the machine helped the people.
Yeah.
And then the people still had to check it. Because I don't know if you guys have been using Midjourney. Half the things coming out of there is hot garbage. And you do need somebody to sit and curate it. I've seen some of, like, our IT guy plays around with it a lot, so thinks it's absolutely lovely. You do need some fairly robust prompts to get anything worthwhile out of it. If you want something like concept art quality, if you just want some abstract piece of screensaver, write whatever you want. You'll get something out of it.
Like, when it comes to things like Midjourney and stuff, I still think there should be a separation or a balance between what has been created by AI and what hasn't.
But they're starting to get legislation about that. AI is not under copyright. Nobody has copyright on AI things.
Right.
I think the U.S. Copyright Court actually went as far as going, it needs to be 80% human created for it to be under copyright rules.
Right.
How you define that, I don't know.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
But, all right, do you have something?
No, I was going to end us off. But...
I was going to say, because if you also, like, now you're asking about AI when it comes to the animation industry, but if you then take into account, like, if you think of other industries as an example, like, let's say the food service industry, we have restaurants that have robots driving around on the floor serving people food. People, like, someone made a machine that took a job that no one really wants
Yeah.
and made it easier for people. It's like, at one point we're gonna get to a point of all these different things just helping us as a tool of doing something that we personally also find tedious.
Yeah.
Like, I have a lot of things in animation that I find tedious to do. I would honestly love if I had like a button that I could click and it would fix those problems. I don't. At the time.
Perfect auto unwrap.
Perfect auto unwrap. That would be sick.
Yeah.
Things like that. It's like, at one point we really have to be careful and respect the people's like, consent is very important when it comes to all these different things. But honestly, all these different things also, it's such a cool thing that we can get out of it if we do it the right way.
Yeah.
And we also have to encourage and accept that, I feel personally.
I agree completely. And yeah, I think that's wonderfully said.
Right. Wow.
And on that bombshell, thank you guys for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. Mito will see you next week, and that's on Wednesday, not Thursday next week.
Yes.
So
Wednesday next week at 5 p.m. Central European time.
Yeah,
I guess.